Hello everyone. So today we're going to discuss the Bill of Rights and the other amendments as well. So the origins of the amendments. So as we discussed in the previous lessons, we talked about how the Federalists were trying to convince most of the people in the state of New York through the Federalist Papers to ratify the Constitution. One of the biggest arguments that the Anti-Federalists made, if you recall, is that there was no Bill of Rights. So, the Federalists came up with a compromise. The Federalists offered to add the amendments after the ratification of the Constitution. James Madison was the primary person who promised this, and so on and so forth. Once New York decided to ratify the Constitution, James Madison got to work and created the original Bill of Rights. They were proposed by the first Congress in 1789. And as I stated before, they were heavily influenced by the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights. One of the supporters of the Bill of Rights was Thomas Jefferson. He was a big proponent of having them. So the main purpose of the Bill of Rights is obviously to spell out the rights of Americans and to their government. It guarantees civil rights and liberties to every American citizen. It also sets a set of rules for due process of law, as we will see later on in the slide. A lot of the amendments attached to it have to do with the law. It also explains the powers that states have that the federal government does not. So in order to add amendments onto the Constitution or to change the Constitution, there is a lengthy process. For starters, 2/3 of Congress has to propose a new amendment, both the House and the Senate. Now, once Congress agrees, 2/3 anyways, that is, then it gets passed on to state legislatures for ratification. You need 3/4 of the states to ratify the amendments. There is another option to get amendments added to the Constitution, in which the states can call for a constitutional convention, similarly to the one that was created back in the late 1780s, when they created the first constitutional convention. However, this has not been done in history in our country, so there's no examples for us to go off of. The biggest thing regarding to the process of adding new amendments, however, is that there is no real timeline for states to ratify amendments. What I mean by that is, once Congress approves of an amendment and once it gets passed off to the states can literally just not vote on it or look at it for years, decades, and in the case of the 27th Amendment, not even voted on for almost 2 centuries. The 27th Amendment, which was added to the Constitution in 1992, was actually one of the original 12 amendments that James Madison had created. As I said before earlier, James Madison wrote 12 original amendments. Only 10 of them were actually ratified by the states. So this process can take years to get processed. But there are some instances, however, where it takes less than a year for some new amendment to be processed. And we'll get more into detail on those later. So the first 10 amendments in the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. Again, once Congress approved the amendments, it was passed to the states. As I said earlier, only 10 of the original 12 were passed. The other 2 that were not passed had to deal with the salaries of representatives and the number of representatives per state. On December 15th, 1791, Virginia became the 10th state to ratify the Bill of Rights out of the 14 states. Now, in 1791, Congress had admitted the state of Vermont into the Union in March, so that's why we have 14 states instead of the 13. And that's why Virginia had to become the 10th state, because then now, if you only had 9, you wouldn't have the majority. Once we look at the Bill of Rights in the next slide, you will notice that the first 9 rights relate to individual rights, as the 10th one relates to the rights of each individual state. So here we have the Bill of Rights. So the First Amendment, most of you probably heard, protection of the right to speech, press, assembly, religion, and petition of government. Second Amendment, protected right to bear arms. Third Amendment, no quartering of soldiers during peacetime in private homes without consent. Amendment number 4, right to secure in your property and person against unreasonable search and seizures. The Fifth Amendment, grand jury against double perjury or jeopardy and self-incrimination, due process, eminent domain. Sixth Amendment, criminal procedure, speedy and public trial, impartial jury, counsel, etc. The Seventh Amendment, civil procedure, jury trial according to rules of common law. Eighth Amendment, no excessive bail or fine, no cruel or unusual punishment. Ninth Amendment, rights not enumerated belong to the people. And the 10th Amendment, powers not delegated to the U.S. belong to the states and the people. So I want to take a time right now and just go through briefly some of these amendments and give you some more detail. Of course, number 1 is pretty simple to understand. You have the right to speech, assembly, freedom of the press, free to express what religion you are. The Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Of course, you are allowed to have some sort of defensive mechanism in your own home. You're allowed to have guns. That's the constitutional right. No quartering of soldiers during peacetime in private homes without consent. So again, this goes back to when the British were allowing the British soldiers sleeping in people's homes in Boston. So they added that in there to not have to face the same issues again. You are also allowed to not allow anybody, especially authority figures such as police, to search your property or your person without probable cause or without a search warrant. Again, this goes back to when the British were ruling the colonies. Grand jury against double jeopardy. So you cannot be placed on trial once you're proven innocent the first time around. So if you were arrested for something and you were proven innocent by a jury of your peers, you can't be tried again for that exact same crime. And also you're given the option to not self-incriminate yourself. So you don't have to stand as a witness if you don't want to against yourself. The Sixth Amendment talks about criminal procedures, so you have the right to a speedy trial. Instead of waiting an extended amount of time for a trial, you can ask for a quicker one. The Seventh Amendment talks about civil procedure, so you are allowed to sue a business or another person and have a jury be the one to decide that outcome. Eighth Amendment, no excessive bail or fine or cruel and unusual punishment. So again, if you are under arrest and the bail is for X amount of dollars, a little bit too high, if you're caught stealing, they can't chop off your hand. Those kind of things are considered as unusual punishment. Number 9, rights not enumerated belong to the people. So anything that is not covered by law, a person has a right to do. So if it's raining outside and they don't want to wear a raincoat, they want to wear shorts and a t-shirt, that's totally fine. 10th Amendment, powers not delegated to the U.S. federal government belong to states. So anything that the federal government doesn't cover, the states can do themselves. And there's other amendments as well that are not part of the Bill of Rights. In total, overall, including the Bill of Rights, there are 27. Some of the amendments are kind of grouped in separate categories. So, for example, we have the Reconstruction Amendments. These are the 13th, 14th, and 15th. These came right after the Civil War, which ended slavery and also gave voting rights to all male, regardless of race. Again, that's male. Voting amendments, we have 19th, 23rd, 24th, 26th. 19th Amendment, we talk about women's suffrage. Women are now allowed to vote. And we have other amendments for the voting amendments, like the 26th, where you can be 18 to vote. And the Prohibition Amendments, 18th Amendment, basically says the sale of alcohol is illegal now in the country, and the 22nd Amendment reverses that amendment.